She walked into that courthouse with a home and 2 kids and a little hope. She walked out with almost none of it. Her lawyer had warned her. Her husband had money, and money buys a certain kind of justice. Now she stood on the courthouse steps in the cold. She held a folder that said she got almost nothing, and she tried to work out how she'd tell her children. Then she heard it, a low sound, far off, getting closer. Rotors, a helicopter, coming down out of a gray sky, right there in the middle of the city. Toward her. Here's where it ends, and it's why you clicked. A single mom is stripped of everything by a rich husband and a court that believed him. She leaves broke. Then, a helicopter lands, and the man who steps out turns her whole life over because of one thing she did 15 years ago and forgot. Subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every one. She didn't know it yet. But the world loves to count a woman out, and it forgets who's been watching. Now, let me tell you about Now. She was an ER nurse before she was anyone's wife. A very good one. She could run a trauma bay on no sleep and read a dying body faster than the doctors. She'd chosen the job because she couldn't stand to watch anyone be turned away. That was the thing about Now. She ran toward the people everyone else backed away from. Then she met Takeshi. He was rich and charming, and he wanted her to stop working. So she did, mostly. She raised 2 children. She kept his beautiful house. She let her license lapse and her savings merge into his. Because that's what you do when you trust someone. That was the mistake, not loving him. Trusting the money to a man who counted it in secret. When the marriage died, Takeshi was ready, and she wasn't. He had lawyers on retainer. He had accountants who'd spent years quietly moving things where a court couldn't see. On paper, the rich man was suddenly almost poor. The businesses were struggling. The accounts were modest. His lawyers painted Now as a woman who'd contributed nothing, who'd simply lived off him and now wanted a payout. They put her on the stand and made her sound like a kept woman. They asked why she'd let her nursing license lapse, as if raising his children had been a hobby. They read out the cost of the house she'd kept, as if she'd been a guest in it. Now answered every question with her chin up. But she watched the judge's face and knew the papers were winning. Numbers on a page always beat a woman telling the truth. When the numbers were arranged by experts, her lawyer was one tired man against a wall of them. He did his best. His best wasn't enough. The judge, looking at the papers in front of her, ruled on the papers in front of her. Now got a small monthly sum. Takeshi kept the house, the businesses, the life. And in the hallway afterward, with his lawyers packing their expensive bags, Takeshi leaned close to Now and said the things she'd carry. "You should have stayed grateful," he said, smiling. "Now go find out what you're worth without me." Not a soul in that hallway said a word for her. His lawyers looked at their phones. A clerk looked at the floor. She stood there, a competent woman who'd saved lives, being told she was worth nothing, and no one in that building of justice made a sound. That was the part that should have broken her. She had no idea, walking out of that courtroom, that 3 weeks earlier her name had crossed the desk of the one man on earth who owed her everything. She thought she was completely alone. She had never been less alone in her life. She just couldn't hear the helicopter yet. But 15 years earlier, on a night she'd almost forgotten, Now had done something that was about to come back for her. She'd been young then, new to the ER. It was past 3 a.m. when they wheeled in a man who'd been shot, bleeding badly, half dead. And the moment the night administrator saw the tattoos under the man's torn shirt, he wanted the man gone. "We don't treat his kind here," the administrator said. "Call for a transfer." Let him be someone else's problem. There was no time for a transfer. A transfer meant the man died in the ambulance. Now knew it. Everyone in that trauma bay knew it. And every one of them looked at the administrator, then at their shoes. Now didn't. He's bleeding out, she said. I'm not letting a man die in a hallway because of a rule about who deserves to live. Prep him. Now. The administrator threatened her job. She kept working. He threatened to call security. She kept working. A doctor, braver now that a nurse had gone first, stepped in to help. Then another. That is how courage works. One person refuses, and the room remembers it has a spine. They opened him up. The tattoos ran the length of his body, full Itazumi, the kind you only see on men from a world most people never touch. She didn't care what the ink said about him. She only cared that his heart was still trying. So she helped it try. She fought for him. She worked on that stranger for 6 hours. She refused to stop when smarter people told her to. And near dawn, against the odds, his heart held. He lived. He woke 2 days later in a bed he wasn't supposed to have been given, treated by a nurse who'd risked her job to keep him breathing. He asked her name. She told him. Then her shift ended, and she went home, and she never saw him again. She didn't know who he was. She didn't ask. To her, he was just a patient the world wanted to throw away, and she'd been raised to believe no one is throwaway. She forgot his face inside a year. She never once told the story to Takeshi. It didn't seem important. It was the most important thing she ever did. Because the man on that table was named Hiro. And in the 15 years since, Hiro had become the most powerful man in the city. He had never forgotten her. Not for a single year. He'd tried, quietly, to find the young nurse who'd stood between him and a rule that would have killed him. But she'd married, and changed her name, and slipped out of the world he could see. He kept looking. A man like Hiro keeps looking. He'd risen out of nothing in the years after. He took a broken family and built it into the most powerful house in Tokyo. Men bowed to him now who had once refused him a hospital bed. But the power never touched the debt. It only made it louder. Every time someone feared him, he thought of the one person who hadn't feared him when he was dying on a table. He sent people to look, discreetly, for years. A young ER nurse, first name Now, who'd worked one winter and then vanished. They found records, then a marriage, then the wall of a rich man's privacy, and the trail went cold. He never called off the search. He just kept it quiet and kept waiting. He never stopped owing her, either. That is a specific thing about certain hard men. They can carry a debt for decades and it only grows heavier. Hiro had built an empire and buried enemies and gone gray. And the whole time a young woman's voice sat in the back of his mind. I'm not letting a man die because of a rule about who deserves to live. He'd been living on borrowed time for 15 years. He knew exactly who lent it to him. Then, 3 weeks before that courthouse, one of Hiro's people brought him a name in a routine report. A messy divorce. A wealthy man hiding assets. A wife being crushed. The name in the file was a married name Hiro didn't know. But the file had a photograph, and Hiro, who had not been surprised by anything in years, went very still. 15 years. And there she was. Find out everything, he said. His voice had changed. Everything he's hidden. Every account. Every lie. I want all of it. And no one touches her. No one frightens her. She's already been frightened enough by people who should have protected her. His people were the best in the country at finding money that did not want to be found. What her tired lawyer couldn't uncover in months, Hiro's people mapped in days. The offshore accounts. The shell companies. The second set of books, the businesses that were struggling while quietly moving millions where a judge would never look. Takeshi had committed a dozen crimes to leave his wife with nothing, and every one of them was now in a folder on Hiro's desk. His people asked if they should simply visit Takeshi, handle it the old way. Hiro said no. She spent her life refusing to let people be thrown away, he said. I won't dishonor that by becoming a thug on her behalf. We do this so it holds, so no one can ever undo it. We beat him with the truth, in the open, where it counts. It was the restraint of a man who'd learned, from her, that there are stronger things than fear. He could have sent it to her lawyer anonymously. Clean, quiet, she'd never have known he existed. He didn't want quiet. Not this time. He wanted her to know the world hadn't abandoned her. He wanted her to see, on the worst day of her life, that a kindness she'd forgotten had been keeping watch over her for 15 years. So he did not send a folder. He came himself. Which is why, as now stood broke and shaking on the courthouse steps, the sky filled with the sound of rotors. The helicopter came down in the plaza. People scattered and stared. It landed like something out of a different life, and a tall man in a dark coat stepped out, unhurried, while men in suits moved around him. The whole plaza went quiet the way a room goes quiet when real power walks in. He crossed to the steps, straight to now, and he stopped in front of her and bowed. A deep bow, held long to a single mom in a cheap coat, in front of a courthouse full of people who just decided she was worth nothing. You don't remember me, Hiro said. There's no reason you would. It was a long time ago, and a bad night, and I looked very different. Now stared at him. I'm sorry, I don't. You were new to the ER, he said. A man was brought in that no one wanted to treat. An administrator said his kind didn't deserve a bed. And a young nurse said she wasn't going to let a man die over a rule about who deserves to live. He paused. You saved my life that night. You never even knew my name mattered. I've been trying to find you for 15 years. The memory came back to her all at once. The blood. The 6 hours. The stranger with the tattoos. Her hand went to her mouth. That was you, she whispered. That was me, Hiro said. And I have spent 15 years owing you a debt I could never repay. Today, I get to start. By then, Takeshi had come out onto the steps, drawn by the helicopter like everyone else. He saw his ex-wife. He saw the most powerful man in the city bowing to her, and the color drained out of his face before he even understood why. Hiro turned to him slowly. Takeshi, he said. The name alone, in that voice, made the man flinch. You hid a great deal of money to leave this woman with nothing. Offshore, shell companies. A second set of books. He let it land. I have all of it. Every account. Every forged filing. It's already with a new lawyer, and a copy is already with the prosecutor's office. Your ruling this morning is built on perjury. It won't survive the week. Takeshi's mouth opened, and nothing came out. You told her to go find out what she's worth without you, Hiro said. Quiet, which was worse than loud. Let's find out what you're worth now that everyone can see what you did. The same courthouse steps that had watched her leave with nothing now watched the most powerful man in the city stand at her side. The clerks who'd looked at the floor were looking now. The lawyers who'd checked their phones had put them away. Everyone who'd been silent for her an hour ago was suddenly, loudly aware of exactly who she was. The case reopened within days. Takeshi's hidden assets came into the light, all of them, and with them the crimes he'd committed to hide them. The ruling was thrown out. He didn't just lose the divorce. He lost the businesses to the fraud charges, the respect of everyone who'd feared him, and eventually his freedom. He'd tried to leave his wife broke on a courthouse step. He was the one who left broke, in the end, and disgraced, and alone. Now got everything that was fair, and it was a great deal. Her home, her security, her children's future. But that isn't the part I keep. Her son asked her once, weeks later, why the helicopter man was so kind to them. Now thought about it. Because a long time ago, she said, I was kind to him when it was hard to be. That's all. It just took a while to come back. The boy nodded, like that made perfect sense. To a child, it does. Only grown-ups forget that kindness keeps a ledger. The part I keep is small. Hero never asked her for anything. He made that clear from the first day. He wasn't there to own her or collect her. He'd repaid a debt, and he would have walked away the moment she asked. She didn't ask. Slowly, in the quiet months after, a man who'd been feared his whole life and a woman who'd been dismissed her whole life found they were easy in each other's company. He was gentle with her children. Her daughter, 6, decided within a week that he was hers and climbed him like furniture, and he let her. Her son was 9 and wary of every man since the divorce, and took longer. Hero didn't push. He just showed up. Steady, again and again. Until the boy decided steady was a thing he could trust. Some evenings, the 4 of them sat on the floor at a low table, on the tatami, and now poured tea the old careful way. The same way she'd once cared for a stranger she thought she'd never see again. He held his tea in both hands, a habit from being cold too often as a boy. She noticed. She noticed everything. That was always her gift. He'd been powerful for 15 years. He'd never once been chosen by someone who wanted nothing from him. She had done it at 24, over a stranger's dying body, and asked for nothing then either. The city told the story wrong, of course. They said a Mafia boss rescued a broke single mom with a helicopter. Takeshi's few remaining friends probably still tell it that way. But that's not what happened, and you watched it, so you know. A young nurse once refused to let the world throw a man away. She did it when it cost her something and gained her nothing. She forgot she'd even done it. And 15 years later, on the worst morning of her life, that forgotten kindness came down out of the sky and stood between her and everyone who'd decided she was worthless. Kindness is not weakness, and it is never wasted. You do not always see where it lands. Sometimes it waits 15 years and grows quietly the whole time and comes back for you on the exact day you have nothing left. Never decide a tired woman is worth nothing. You have no idea who's been keeping watch. If that moved you, tell me the moment it got you. The bow on the steps, that was you. Or Hero, turning to Takeshi. Put it in the comments. Share this with someone who was written off by the person who should have valued them most. And if you want the story of who Hero was before that ER, the night he was shot, and what he did with the 15 years she gave back to him, vote for part 2 below, and I'll tell you everything.